Thanks for joining us here on France 24. Well, the Munich Security Conference opens this Friday with the war in Ukraine, of course, at the top of the agenda. Questions about where Washington's loyalties lie have swirled since Donald Trump caught EU allies off guard earlier this week when he held a phone call with Vladimir Putin. But comments from J.D. Vance ahead of the meeting threw another curveball, this time at the Kremlin. The U.S. vice president warning Russia that Washington could hit Moscow with more sanctions if it does not agree to a good peace deal with Ukraine. Those remarks coming ahead of his planned meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky. Well, for more on this, Dr. Gavin Hall joins us now on the program. He's a NATO expert and teaching fellow in political science and international security at the University of Strathclyde. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor. So we saw earlier this week Donald Trump breaking with the rest of the West by holding that direct call with Vladimir Putin. Then we heard some kind of conflicting comments from J.D. Vance today. Are we seeing a conflicting messaging then coming out of the White House?
Good afternoon. And yes, I think it's fair to say there are some conflicting messages that are coming out of the White House. And I don't think this is particularly uncommon with sort of the Trumpian rhetoric that we first got used to between 2016 and 2020, and also more recently, whereby their initial statements sort of that appear to be moving in one direction and quite firm, and then some subsequent clarifications and things that come forward. Also in this, the US Defense Secretary Hegseth, he initially said that Ukraine's definitely not going to be part of NATO. Any peacekeeping forces in Ukraine wouldn't be covered by Article 5 protection, but has since sort of clarified and rode back on that a little bit. So there are definitely some mixed messages going on, and partly this is likely to be the product of meetings that have been had both with President Zelensky and also conversations with other European leaders and things who are curious about where they're going to sit within the overall plan. But I think it's important to emphasize that this is not actually peace talks that have negotiated. This is sort of the preliminary posturing that's going on to try and establish what the parameters are going to be for those peace negotiations, which in reality are a continuation of the conflict just by non-violent means.
So the EU and NATO really, I think, have been watching all of this with quite a bit of anxiety. If Washington does pursue the path of prioritizing Vladimir Putin's objectives in any possible peace deal, does the EU have any leverage at all to try and push for an alternative plan?
Well, if there's a bilateral arrangement between President Trump and President Putin, then it's up to Ukraine and the other European Union and the UK members to say, do we accept this? Do we want to go along with this? Or are we going to publicly refute it? Is there much they could actually do about it? Well, that depends on the level of challenge. But I think if there's sufficient resistance, then that arguably helps to achieve one of Putin's goals, which is effectively trying to weaken the cohesion of the European Union and the North Atlantic security body to a point whereby it's unable to actually operate and offer credible deterrence.
So speaking of that, what do you think this all means or signals for the survival or credibility of NATO moving forward, with the possibility of a peace deal or not aside, all of this political bickering, the divisions? I mean, it's already weakening the alliance.
Well, it is and it isn't. In one sense, it's also nothing new. There have been many challenges to NATO cohesion over the past 80 years, but the alliance has always found a way through to it. What we're really seeing now is President Trump, partly as his Make America Great Again kind of rhetoric, trying to assert American hegemony and dominance moving forward. But at the same time, he's also saying to the European members, you need to be spending more on your defence. You need to be inputting more. You need to be more active in things and not just relying on the US. So he's effectively saying, not only do we want to lead, but we want you to pay for it as well. And for a country that was founded after a revolution based on taxation without representation, it's quite a sort of staggering about turn. But once again, we're at the sort of preliminary stages of things, and it's going to move into a ceasefire agreement, then agreements to do with how to disengage, and the potential peace plan is going to be fraught with difficulties and challenges, and is likely to be multi-staged anyway.
So you are a NATO expert. You've been researching these themes for quite some time now. Have you ever seen a more dangerous tipping point in terms of the reshaping of the international rules-based order than now?
Well, the big substantive change that happened with the rules-based order was 1991 and the end of the Cold War, and what that new settlement was going to look like, moving from the bilateral superpower countries into a more multipolar world, which is then seen with the whether the former East Germany is going to be reunifying with the West, moving into issues to do with nuclear weapons, potential future NATO expansions. So there were substantive challenges then, but you can go back even further and say 1967, when there was the Harmel report looking into building more détente with Russia and things. So there have been several challenges like this historically, but the key thing is, by consensus operation, NATO members and coming together and speaking with one voice have been able to find a way through them.
We'll see if they're able to pull it off again at this conference then. Dr. Gavin Hall of Strathclyde University, thank you very much.
Thank you.